Hello, my name is John Marcoline, a landscape architect and urban designer at the Montgomery County Planning Department. In this presentation, I will be discussing how conventional zoning practices inhibit building of missing middle housing. As a reminder, this presentation is educational and informational on the broad topic of missing middle housing, and we are not proposing recommendations in this presentation. I would like first to recap what missing middle housing is, then go over some issues with density-based zoning, review some common barriers using conventional zoning, and introduce you to a few alternatives. Then I will review a few examples of form-based zoning that were introduced in our Silver Spring Visioning workshop, and then end with some food for thought. Let's start off with the basic definition as defined by Opticos Design and missing middle housing. Missing middle housing is house-scale buildings built in a range of smaller units and multi-unit or clustered housing types located in walkable communities that meets the needs for more housing choices at different price points. This diagram shows a spectrum of where missing middle housing sits within housing typologies. The types highlighted in the yellow and orange are typical missing middle housing typologies and are house scale, meaning 1 and 3 stories in height. I will now go over some issues with density-based planning. Density-based zoning discourages small units. A system of density caps, as opposed to house scale size in the form of allowed units per acre, combined with large lot requirements, discourages the creation of 2, 3, and 4 unit projects and encourages developers to build the largest buildings that the lot will allow. Multifamily zones in Montgomery County, the zones R30, R20, and R10 require between 14.5 and 43.5 units per acre on large lots. They discourage and effectively ban 2, 3, and 4 unit projects on small lots. Density, in terms of units per acre, does not equal building size. For example, as seen in these illustrations, a 16-unit multifamily building on 2 acres of land has the same density as a 5-unit house on a 7,500 square foot lot. But zoning does not allow this in Montgomery County. I will now discuss a few barriers to missing middle housing using conventional zoning. Many cities with missing middle housing were built prior to conventional zoning, which separates uses and housing types, making the mixing of different housing types illegal. Today, few zoning codes effectively enable missing middle housing because they don't have zones that address housing types between a single-family detached home and a mid-rise apartment building. Even if a city or county wants to deliver small-scale multi-unit buildings, zoning laws often hinder it. For example, the zoning code in Montgomery County, Maryland, does not allow more than 2-unit houses in the residential zones. As you can see here in this zoning table taken from the zoning code, multi-unit housing is not allowed in single-family zones. In the zoning code, 2-unit dwellings are only allowed in multifamily zones, designed for large lot projects over 20 units. Therefore, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes are effectively outlawed because the developer will construct the most economically viable building type on these large lots, which are multifamily buildings of 20 or more units. Zoning by lot size results in multifamily zones adjacent to single-family zones with nothing in between, as seen in this image. 2-unit houses and townhouses are a limited conditional use that are technically allowed, as seen in the images here, but the requirements are onerous. Another barrier is ineffective mapping of zones, where only one type of housing is allowed over large areas. This image shows large swaths of Montgomery County that are zoned almost exclusively for single-family homes. Impact fees are also a barrier to missing middle housing. They are often skewed towards large multi-unit developments as opposed to 3 and 4-unit projects. These images show school impact fees for a 30-unit project versus a 4-unit house in Montgomery County as of February 2021. As you can see, the school impact fee for a 4-unit missing middle housing is more than 3 times higher than for a 30-unit multifamily project. Parking requirements are yet another barrier to missing middle housing. As noted in our presentation on missing middle housing and parking on our website, high off-street parking requirements in the zoning code are difficult to accommodate in 2, 3, and 4-unit projects. Now I'll discuss alternatives to conventional zoning. As can be seen on the left side of the diagram, conventional zoning requires large lots and encourages large multi-unit buildings over 20 units in size. Building according to a form-based code, as seen on the right, allows 2 and 4 unit house scale buildings on single family lots. I will now provide an example of how to fit house scaled 2 and 3 unit buildings on a single family lot. The following examples are from our Silver Spring Visioning Workshop. The ideal lot in the code is 60 feet wide. The ideal R60 lot in the code is 60 feet wide and 100 feet deep, as shown in the diagram on the left. No more than 35% of the lot can be covered by a building. 30% if one completely tears down an existing building and builds a new house. The building line is not the same as a front setback. While there is a 25-foot minimum front setback, the building line is basically the imaginary line in a given block that all the building fronts align with. Since this differs by block and it may exceed the minimum setback, the zoning gives a minimum setback distance and then also establishes that the front of a building must be in line with the building line on that block. At the right, you see 2 diagrams. The upper one illustrates a typical house that might be found on an R60 lot, particularly in the Silver Spring area. Approximately a footprint of 650 to 900 square feet, 2 stories with a gabled roof. The lower diagram shows how much of the lot one can use if one was to tear down an existing house and build a new one, using all 30% of lot area as permitted and going up 2.5 or 3 floors to the height limit of 35 feet. In addition, currently in R60, only single-family homes are permitted via the standard method of development. We're going to look at a lot in East Silver Spring for how missing middle housing might be applied. This lot type is narrower and longer than the ideal R60 lot. The lot is 50 feet wide by 150 feet deep, typically with a 1 to 2 story house, 1 story shown here, that is 1,400 to 1,800 square feet in size. The building line at East Silver Spring tends to be around 30 feet from the lot line, so we're showing that here. Shown in this diagram are 2 and 3 unit house scale missing middle buildings. They're just diagrammatic massings, and the lots shown are all the same, 50 by 150 foot lots. Starting on the left, there is a side-by-side duplex. This is the same size as a typical 1-story single-family home, just divided down the middle with a party wall to create 2 units, around 700 to 800 square feet each. The driveway extends to the back to park 1 car for each unit on site, which is a typical parking approach for such housing in a walkable neighborhood proximate to transit. We will take this approach to parking for all our examples. The building in the middle is a stacked duplex with a massing shown that is approximately the same size as a typical 2-story single-family home on this lot. 2 cars are parked at the rear end of the lot, and the building remains well under the 35-foot height limit. At the right is a 3-unit house or triplex, a house with a raised ground floor to provide a porch or stoop, similar to many houses in the neighborhood, with a roof that meets the 35-foot height requirement. Since the units remain at 800 square feet or smaller, the footprint of the building is slightly larger than the stacked duplex, and the massing is slightly different. 3 cars can still be parked in the back. As you can see from the diagrams, all 3 types of housing comply with the current R60 coverage and setback requirements. Now that I've shown how missing middle housing might be constructed on a single-family lot, I want to review a few strategies that will allow missing middle housing in single-family zone areas. The first is an overlay zone. It is a separate set of rules for a particular area. For example, the Fenton Village overlay zone in Silver Spring adds height restrictions to the underlying zone. An overlay zone in a neighborhood will allow 2, 3, and 4 unit house scale buildings in a single family zone, such as R60 or R90, which otherwise would not allow it. A second strategy would be to create a new zone specifically for missing middle housing. And a third strategy would be to revise current single family zoning to enable missing middle housing by right. Finally, all 3 of these strategies would benefit from a pattern book that would guide the placement, form, and scale of missing middle housing appropriate to a neighborhood. And to end, I would like to leave you with some food for thought. Many of us know family or friends who grew up in missing middle housing that was built before 1940. What are the memories of those places? Were they negative or positive? Would you buy a duplex or a triplex if it could help you to move into your preferred neighborhood or closer to transit? And could you see a duplex or triplex as a way of keeping extended family together? Thank you very much for listening to this presentation on missing middle housing. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to the Silver Spring Downtown and Adjacent Communities Planning Team at our website or contact Tara Margulies or Leslie Howerton at the contacts listed. Thank you very much.